doing this case study on Julian Assange. I'm recording this on April 11th, and Julian Assange was just arrested, taken out of the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And I have several charts here that I'm going to be looking at that shows his incarceration and arrest. And I'm also going to be doing like a quick rectification that shows why I think he is Scorpio and not Libra, and a few things. So check this out. I think you'll really like it. We have a, according to Astro Data Bank, which is where you can find authoritative information on charts, he was born around 3 o'clock in the afternoon on July 3rd, 1971. There was an earlier time also given that was maybe around 2 o'clock. Now you see I have the chart here. This is for 3:30. If I go back to 2:30, you wind up seeing that, or like let's say 1:30, you wind up seeing that it's a Libra rising sign. If we go ahead, look, it's like 0 Scorpio at 2:30. But then if we get after 2:30, we go ahead 10 minutes, 2:37, we're already in Scorpio. And by 3 o'clock, around this time, we're in Scorpio Ascendant. And that Scorpio Ascendant, especially if it's around early Scorpio, we wind up with Jupiter very close to the Ascendant, retrograde Jupiter. Now, my feeling is this is the proximity of his birth time, is this early Scorpio or somewhere in Scorpio rising. And I'll show you why in a minute as well. But first of all, you can just understand that, of course, look at his nature, look at what he does. He's involved in secret information, exposing secrets, and sort of toward a more, a higher sense of justice, which again, clear Jupiter and Scorpio energies. It's just textbook. Of course, if he's a Libra ascendant, again, Libra is much more sort of peaceful and social. Again, it's maybe social justice, but it would be the moon in the first, which again, quite different than having Jupiter in the first. And again, Libra with moon in the first shows someone who was much more maybe wanting to cooperate with culture rather than kind of rabble-rouse and shake things up a little bit. Again, there could definitely be a case to be made for the Libra as well, because in Libra, Saturn is in the 8th house. In Scorpio, you have Venus, Sun in the 8th house. There's a lot of 8th house things regardless. There are some things that really could be explained either way, almost sort of equally. But what's not is that general nature of Scorpio, that Jupiter in the first house. And when he was confined to the embassy in 2012, it was a very important transit. It was this chart here. This was the day, September 19th, 2012, is when he was confined to the Ecuadorian embassy in London, which is where he's been since today. And if you look at that, at the transit of that day, we have Rahu, 346 of Scorpio. And of course, look at his Jupiter, 350 of Jupiter. I'm sorry, yeah, his Jupiter is 350 of Scorpio. So either way, whether it's, regardless of what the Ascendant is, the day he was incarcerated in the London embassy, the Ecuadorian embassy, Rahu was right by transit on his natal Jupiter. But it's a matter of like what house that is, how this impacts his life more. And again, you can see very clearly if this is a Scorpio ascendant as well, that transit of Rahu through the first house and right on his Jupiter in the first. Of course, the first house is our freedom and our autonomy, and those things which become much more clear when it's the first house, and it's Rahu going over Jupiter in the first house, taking away our freedom and our autonomy. But also, if you look, you can see the other transits on that day. If it was a Libra rising, you would have all these planets in the first house, but instead they're in the 12th house of, what is it? Imprison, incarceration. Again, it's not a prison, but he was prevented from leaving. It was basically a sort of, not an imprisonment, but it was exile in the Ecuadorian embassy, which means he couldn't leave. As soon as, if he would leave, he would be arrested. So it's kind of like a house arrest in a foreign embassy. And again, the day that that happened, all of these planets were going through Saturn, or I'm sorry, were going through his 12th house, and he was having a lunar return. Just look at the transits that day. If it's a Scorpio ascendant, he's got the moon in the 12th. Now again, this is the 9th lord in the 12th. 9th house has to do with the sense of justice. In the 12th house has to do in foreign lands, foreign countries. You can see this pretty clearly. And you can see how this moment, he was having a literal lunar return. It was his nakshatra return for that month in Swati nakshatra, and Mars was there, and so was Saturn. So again, very powerful. All these malefics going through the 12th of incarceration, particularly Saturn, really important, and Mars would be his ruling planet. Very much makes sense. And let me pull up the dashas here. I had this before, and I need to pull that up. So his dashas, I want to show, especially what's going on right now. Now again, I haven't rectified this down to the exact moment, but I have a feeling that the birth time would make it so that Mercury, Venus, it's either my feeling is it's either Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, or Mercury, Venus, Saturn are his dashas. If we move this birth time forward a little bit, we get that Mercury, Venus, Saturn just happened. So Mercury, Venus, Saturn, if he would have been born around 3:30 in the afternoon, he'd be in Mercury, Venus, Saturn right now. So again, if we back this up and look and see when he was incarcerated in 2012, at that time, it would have been right in Saturn, Jupiter dasha as well. And so his whole Mercury dasha, he would have been in this incarcerated state. And again, when we look at what Mercury rules, first of all, Mercury is the 8th lord for Scorpio. And again, you look at what the planets rule. Mercury rules, especially his Venus Sun in the 8th house. And again, the 8th house is, it's not necessarily imprisonment, but it's, it's change and transformation and literally like a sort of death. But it also has a real quality of isolation. But how Mercury is really related to this sort of incarcerated state is it rules Venus, the 12th lord. Again, because incarceration, arrest, totally 12th house things. And Mercury rules the 12th lord. Now, I'm just looking at the Rashi chart. We would look at Navamsha chart. In fact, let me pull it up and look at the Navamsha. I haven't. I'm just doing this right now. You're seeing this pretty much live because all of this stuff that's going on, I just wanted to check out his chart. Let's see here. Okay, so we don't have the exact rectified time. So, but I wanted to see what Mercury and Venus rule. So Venus is in the 12th house. So if it's Mercury, Venus, which is what it would be in now, Venus is in its own sign. Mercury rules Mars. We don't have this Navamsha Lagna rectified, so not much I can say about that. Actually, let me bring up the Pada chart, though. Let me just bring up the Padas and see. Get rid of this Vargas here. Okay. So the Bhava Padas also show a lot here. Okay. Because we have this correct. So Mercury would be ruling the 9th Bhava Pada here. Mercury, Venus. If it's Mercury, Venus, Venus rules the 10th Pada in the 12th. This shows, again, very similar themes of career in foreign country and full of change. In the Rashi chart, we can see also that Mercury rules the 10th lord in the 8th. So you could see how that Mercury Dasha, which has been happening since he's been incarcerated in the Ecuadorian embassy, rules Venus, the 12th lord, in the 8th. And again, it shows an incarceration with a certain amount of freedom. This is a Viparit Raj Yoga, because it's not just ruling the 12th lord, it's ruling the 12th lord in the 8th. So this is how you can see some comfort brought to his incarceration. He hasn't been in jail. He's been incarcerated in the Ecuadorian embassy. But Mercury also rules the 10th lord in the 8th. 10th lord is also the sun in the 8th house. Okay? So again, there's quite a few things that also shifted. I'm also going to show when he was first arrested, which is a very important chart as well. But first, just getting my head around a few of these things. Also, Mercury rules his Ketu in the 9th, if we're looking at Scorpio, which is in Aslesha Nakshatra. So let's go back here. I'm thinking that it's almost certainly Mercury-Venus, because we could have a wide swath of time and it would be Mercury-Venus. I'm just trying to nail that third level dasha, and it could be Mercury-Venus-Jupiter or Mercury-Venus-Saturn, right? And both of them would make sense, because his incarceration started in Saturn-Jupiter. So you could see both of them lead to the possibility of incarceration, and especially Jupiter, I think, with this retrograde in the first. Also, what does Jupiter rule? Jupiter rules, in the Rashi chart, it doesn't rule anything except the 2nd and 5th house, and it's retrograde in the first. And so these are a few things why, and again, starting with this as a rectification exercise, I definitely think it's more Scorpio, and I'm showing you my reasons. And by the way, this is, well, actually, let me pull up the transits right now as well. And let me just pull it up, new chart. Pull it up as a new chart. Okay. So this is the transit chart today. One second, let me do something here. So this is the transit chart today. Okay, this is where we're at today. Look at what we have, especially this Gandantha over here. We have this Gandantha, Jupiter, going across this Gandantha point, and Jupiter just turned retrograde yesterday. Let's go back. Oops. Jupiter just turned retrograde yesterday. This is April 10th. Here on April 11th, Jupiter is retrograde on the Gandantha point. Now again, understand that this Mula Jeshta Gandantha is a very unstable section of the zodiac, which we astrologers have been talking about all year. I said at the beginning of the year in my 2019 forecast and everything that there will be major themes of justice, social justice, legal justice. I talked about things like the Catholic Church and the whole fake news kind of thing. Look at the justice system in the U.S. now blowing up. We had a huge day yesterday as Jupiter turned retrograde. The Attorney General in the United States came out and declared that Trump's campaign was spied on. I mean, this is crazy stuff. Never hear this kind of stuff. Jupiter retrograde, all kinds of things shifting. Since Rahu went into Gemini, again, we had the release of that Mueller report, really crazy. We have the Brexit, trying to reverse Brexit that just happened. Right now, this is happening in England. We just had the leader of Sudan, who had been a leader for like 30 years, just removed from office. Crazy shifts with this Jupiter retrograde right on the Gandantha point, like in the last 24 hours or so. Crazy things just happened, okay? So I'm talking about Assange because we have a good chart, but these are like four or five major things that just happened, right? And so again, this is why these Gandantha points are so volatile. And again, I am going to say this because you have to understand this is sidereal zodiac specific. Okay, at the beginning of every Vedic astrology text where they talk about the zodiacs, they say, Ashwini and Aries are aligned. Again, which means all the Rashis and Nakshatras are aligned this way. That brings out and connects these Gandantha points where in between the water and the fire signs, both Nakshatra and Rashi stop. It's a Gandantha point. It's a point where the energy stops and things are in this limbo state, this kind of liminal state. This is why. And again, you don't have to have it explicitly stated to have it be implicit. It's certainly implicit in the fact that you see this indication for zodiacs in all the Jyotish texts right at the beginning, right? Aries, Ashwini, which means all the zodiac nakshatras line up with the zodiac rashis. They're the same portion of sky. And that's how you can understand it. There's no reason to get confused. Okay? It's one sky. And the portion that has Ashwini is where Aries starts. It's just totally crystal clear. Which means that by the time you get to this point in the zodiac, Jeshta and Mula are going to line up at Scorpio, Sagittarius. Again, they don't have to say it with every nakshatra. You say it once at the beginning, and that lines them all up. This is why you have these Gandantha points. Okay, it's very clear. Jeshta Mula, Eslesha Magha, Revati Ashwini. These are the Gandantha points, and this is why you see it. Energy is very unstable. And Jupiter is hovering around this Gandantha point for like a month. You've heard all the Vedic astrologers point to this time as being really transformative and crazy, with the nodes changing signs, with Jupiter hovering on the Gandantha point for a month. This was going to be a time when things just went a little bonkers. So very important to see this as well. And again, it's just affirmation of the sidereal zodiac as well, because again, hours before Rahu crossed over this Gandantha point, that was when the Mueller report was released, literally hours before. And again, what have astrologers been saying? I've certainly been saying it, that Rahu going into Gemini is going to show this disclosure of information that shifts everybody's paradigm. Suddenly, everyone's view or vision or version of news and what they thought was correct is going to shift and change. Bam! Totally zodiac based. If you're using tropical, there's nothing. It has nothing to do with this. It's in the middle of Gemini, and it's somewhere around 24 degrees of Sagittarius. That variation and hovering on these degrees and this uncertainty isn't a part of it. So notice that it's very important. Okay, and again, this is why you do case studies. This is why I do this all the time, and it's why I use sidereal, because I've been researching this for 15 years. I've been doing this. And when it's predicted and it happens like that and it's backed up by every text, what else do you do? So let's look at something else that's very important. This is when Julian Assange was arrested in England. You might have heard. Now, the reason he wound up in the embassy was he was actually arrested. He was charged by the government of Sweden, I believe, for rape and other things that turned out to not be correct. But he was actually arrested December 7th, 2010. Look at the date that he was arrested. Check out these transits. All of these planets piled up in Mula Nakshatra very early. This was when he was first arrested in England, in London. He hasn't left since then, I don't think. I think he was in London the whole time. He was certainly in the embassy since this date, which we just talked about. Oh, and by the way, the other thing I didn't mention about the embassy date is if it's Scorpio, of course, Rahu is right on Jupiter in the first, but also Ketu and Jupiter are in the 7th. It's like, right? And all those planets going through the 12th, which I mentioned. But this arrest, again, notice this arrest chart and the chart of the day today, where you have Jupiter here hovering on this Gandantha point. Jupiter just went in, right? Here was the arrest chart. Jupiter Jupiter was here when he was first arrested in 2010. He was up here very early of Pisces, like less than 1 degree. And today he's here when he's taken out of the embassy. This is when he was taken out. You can also see that we have Saturn and Ketu also in Sagittarius. They're far away from the exact degree because all these planets are in Mula. But again, with Jupiter poking his head in there, in Sagittarius, in the Nakshatra Mula, and then turning retrograde yesterday. Again, retrograde tends to reverse something. And it's basically reversing this more than the other because this was where he was incarcerated, and it took him out of this. So again, fascinating case studies here. Wanted to show, first of all, like a sort of rectification so you can see how an astrologer who knows how to rectify charts, what you would basically look at. And again, I'm just looking at a few different things here. I don't have his whole bio and his whole life history. But again, we can see some very clear demarcations in time where Mercury Dasha, within this range of about an hour, is going to show incarceration. Regardless, again, even that, Mercury is much more of a malefic. It's a functional malefic for the Scorpio ascendant. Again, it's kind of neutral because if it's Libra, Mercury rules the 9th house, which has to do also with the legal system. But again, it also rules Venus and the Sun in the 9th house, which is really quite auspicious because Venus is the Lugna Lord, it's the ruling planet, and this winds up being quite powerful. Here, Mercury is much less of a beneficial planet for Scorpio. Plus, you know, it winds up being, I mean, it's with Ketu either way, but, you know, again, it winds up being in the 9th house of the legal system. You could still see that legal implication if you're using the Scorpio ascendant, because Mercury winds up being the 8th and 11th lord, which also has to do with public. In the 9th house of you know, the legal system, and with Ketu, again, which is also just, you know, Ketu is the great eraser. It like takes us out of things. Ketu is literally kind of the planet. Saturn and Ketu are also the planets of, you might say, incarceration or prison, because really what happens when we're in prison is we're kind of erased. Or, you know, Assange was kind of taken out of society and forced to stay in that Ecuadorian embassy. And again, this is what Ketu does. Ketu sort of takes us out of the game. Rahu has us in the game, all over the place. Ketu is like, okay, now you're out of it. It's like an eraser. So you can see, regardless of whether it's Libra or Scorpio, and I'm open for other people's interpretations, but again, regardless, Mercury Dasha, you can see how there's a quality of this like imprisonment or this self-negation, whether it's against our will or not, which in this case it's against our will. So I think it's a fascinating case study, and again, also just fascinating because of what's happened even in the last couple weeks, but especially this last day. It's been like one thing after the next. Again, it's easy to get jaded, but we've never had an attorney general like in the U.S. It's shocking now that the Attorney General Barr in the U.S. not only is clearly now revealed himself to be someone who is protecting Donald Trump. I mean, it's just clear now. Not only is he not, it's going to be really hard to get the full Mueller report, but he's also come out and said that the U.S., that the agencies were spying. Again, there's already investigation, there's already legal, they're already looking into it legally before Barr ever came out and said all of that stuff. There's the intelligence, their own internal investigations, which are really quite fair. They were really hard on the previous investigations on Comey. Anyway, without getting too in the weeds about that, it's just shocking to hear the Attorney General come out and basically give credence to this whole narrative about witch hunt and and spies, really without adding anything new. He said they were spies, and then he's like, well, I don't know. I'm not really sure, but we have to look into it. Well, that's all you needed to say. You don't even say we have to look into it. They're already looking into it. It was just a nothing. There was no reason to say it. Literally, because the Justice Department and the FBI and whatnot, their internal reviews are already taking place. And they're really quite fervent, because these organizations, most of the time, they are very diligent up and down, because they can, these agents, this is not only their job, but if they are found to be abusing the legal system or conspiring or doing this, I mean, these people face heavy jail time. Just like any other job, they're not going to willingly and illegally break the law. If they do, they're under heavy review. The point of the matter is those things are already happening. And for the Attorney General, who is literally the main law enforcement in the country, the one overseeing, to come out and just gratuitously say, well, I think there was spying, but I guess we'll have to look into it. When they're already looking into it, and they said, well, do you have proof there was spying? No, but we should look into it. Like, well then, why are you saying spying? Like, you're just giving a gift to the hardline right-wingers who just want to discredit it. So again, it's shocking. It's shocking that, now they're backing out of Brexit. Again, crazy. They're trying to back out of it again. Now they've been delayed. It was supposed to be a hard Brexit that was supposed to happen, but suddenly it got shifted and delayed until October, I think. This leader in Sudan, who had been installed for like 30 years, suddenly, literally the inner circle, like his inner guard, just said, okay, it's time for you to go now, dude. There's sort of chaos and turmoil right now. And now this Assange, suddenly, all within like 24 hours, huge things happen. So again, you see that the volatility of this Gandantha point. And again, you can see how there's a theme of like justice and legal, if not just the legal system directly, but at least things that have a legal ramification and a sense, again, not just legal system, but a sense of hope and purpose and meaning. Even like with Brexit, which is, where are we going? Where are we going? What's the point of what we're doing? These are all big Sagittarius themes, Jupiterian themes. And I also don't want it to be lost that this is very much a case study in the zodiacs as well, because this is happening literally within weeks of Rahu moving into Gemini, Jupiter in this Gandantha point. This is what Vedic astrologers up and down have said this year. Watch out, April through like the summer. This is going to be crazy time because of these shifts that are happening and Jupiter hovering on the Gandantha point. Now we're seeing it. These things shifting with big implications that we can't really measure yet. Assange comes back. He's put on trial. He's a lightning rod for all kinds of things on the left and the right. It scrambles everything. Because again, he was arrested in England because of charges from the U.S. from years ago. But we have a president in the United States who came out for a couple of years. I love WikiLeaks. I love WikiLeaks. But the government, that same government now charged him. So again, if he has to face charges in the U.S., especially about leaking emails or whatnot, he has the right to discovery. He could disclose all kinds of stuff that could blow up all of this idea that there was no collusion or whatever. Who knows? Again, it scrambles the chessboard now in a way that nobody really could see coming. Just like the Mueller report shifted everything one way, and first we're like, okay, totally exonerated. Now we're like, wait a second. Now we don't know if he's totally exonerated. We have an attorney general who is not releasing this to the public when something like 85% of the public wants to see the damn thing. He's not doing it, and he's saying, I'm not doing it. I'm doing what I want to do. And again, if we were trusting that he might be an honest broker, he kind of laid that to rest yesterday. Talking before the Congress, saying, well, there might be spies. Like, what? Do you want to take that back, Mr. Attorney General? No. I'm just thinking we need to look into that, because I think there were spies. Well, what are you, like, on Fox News or something? You're not a Fox News commentator now. You're Attorney General. You don't get to say, I think there were spies. Again, that's very different. That's very charged language. That's criminal behavior. That's could be treasonous, punishable by death. I mean, these are serious allegations, right? Conspiracy theory 101. So how does that scramble and shift the chessboard? It's very hard to figure. And by the way, those who are saying that it's exonerating Trump and all this now, again, just wait. Just wait. Wait. Because we don't know what any of this means yet. We're right at the point where this is going to scramble everything. It scrambles people on the right and the left politically. Nobody really knows the implications of all this yet. So that's what myself and many others said when this happened. It was going to shift things and change things, and it's going to challenge everyone's paradigm, everyone's worldview. All the people that thought, for instance, that the Mueller thing was going to totally destroy Trump and now we're going to impeach him, they've had to rethink that whole thing. And very quickly, the Trump people too, as soon as it came out and they're like, see, exonerated, we're like, well, wait a minute. There's all kinds of stuff still to come. And right now we're in this limbo state. This makes it even more so. Now let's throw arresting Julian Assange into the mix. Not to mention a few other things happened that I didn't even mention, but these are huge. We had these elections in Israel the day before, yesterday, that Netanyahu could have lost, but he wound up winning, squeaking by. And some huge proclamations happened this week where the Secretary of State, Pompeo, declared the Iranian national, what are they called? Revolutionary Guard, I think, a terrorist state, amping up the rhetoric to the max on Iran, which, again, this is not what we need in the world right now. Just inciting the possibility for violence in the Middle East, declaring the Iranian National Guard a terrorist state, and then, of course, they declared the U.S. Army a terrorist state. I mean, it's like this has been in the last few days, last couple days, right before Jupiter turned retrograde. So, and in this Gandantha point, and Rahu just changing signs. So think about a month ago, things look a lot different politically for sure. Maybe in your world and in your life, there's a similar kind of scrambling happening right now. So check this out, and I hope this was interesting and helpful for you to listen to.